Fantasy football playoffs is upon us, and you might be looking for that edge to get you over the finish line, get you into the playoffs, or solidify your playoff positioning. I'm going to help you out right now. I'm going to give you three kickers that are you can stream this week that are actually rostered in less than 5% of sleeper leagues. Let's win that fantasy football championship. Let's get to it right now. All right. What's going on, folks? My name is Michael Hoff, part of the Face Off Sports Network. And yes, this is the kickers, streamers, and rankings for week 14 of the fantasy football season. Rounding third, headed for home, to coin a phrase from another sport. But I'm going to look to help you out here this week, get you over the hump. Little programming note, because a lot of you have asked. The playoff video is coming. This video is going to be dropping on Monday evening, so you can enjoy that. The playoff kicker video will drop on Tuesday. So you can always subscribe, hit the subscribe button. You can feel free to like this as long as you're doing all that fun stuff. And that video will drop tomorrow, and you can get every morsel of playoff goodness that you want. I'll also tell you guys, if you have any questions, comments whatsoever, fire it into the comments here. I take pride in trying to answer as many of you guys as I possibly can. With that being said, we'll do a really quick recap of week 13. As of this recording, Andy Borregales has yet to take the field against the New York Football Giants, so we hope he does well. He was one of our streamers, but our other two streamers, Will Lutz, put up 9 points, and then we had Zane Gonzalez of the Atlanta Falcons in a losing effort, putting up 8 points against the Jets. So solid outings. And as for the rankings, 7 of my 12 kickers ranked inside the top 12 finished with at least 8 points. Obviously, Borregales, we're waiting on him. He was in my top 12. He could make it 8 out of 12. That'd be a hell of a number. So we'd love to see that. Now, why do kickers matter? People always like to laugh at kickers. They think the kickers aren't a serious thing. But listen, when I tell you the amount of points this particular kicker scored last week, maybe it matters. We had Evan McPherson last week in week 13, rostered in only 28% of sleeper leagues, went on to score 22 fantasy points. In half-point formats, that's more than Devontae Adams and Nico Collins had. Devontae Adams, a touchdown machine, couldn't touch Evan McPherson in week 13. So maybe kickers matter. So maybe we pay attention to this sort of thing. That's why I'm here, so that you don't have to. Also, as we get into our streamers this week, again, normally I do it. They're rostered in 35% or less of leagues. That's so I get my words out. Like I told you guys at the top, though, these guys are all rostered in less than 5% of leagues. So some diamonds in the rough for sure. I do want to remind you guys, though, this is the last week that we have buys. We have 4 teams on bye: the 49ers, Panthers, Giants, Patriots, all on bye. So with that being said, let's get into our streamers. Again, all these guys are rostered in 5% or less of leagues. The first guy we have is going to be Mr. Jake Moody of the Washington Commanders. I could not find a picture of him from last night kicking against the Denver Broncos, so I just chose to use this little graphic here. Hope you don't mind. Rostered in only 2% of leagues. He's going to be at the Minnesota Vikings. Moody did play in his first game, as I mentioned, against the Broncos last night. He did okay for himself. I mean, while he averaged 13.5 points in his 2 games as a kicker for the Chicago Bears during a Cairo Santos injury, he did have 8 points last night. And listen, that was against a Broncos team that's kind of middle of the road in terms of points allowed on a per-game basis, 8.9 to be exact. This Week 14 matchup is much more favorable. Again, I mentioned it, going up against the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings have had 6 games with double-digit points allowed to kickers. 5 of those have come in the last 6 weeks. Even worse, the Vikings have allowed 15 or more points in 2 out of the last 3 weeks. While he's only played in 3 other games this year outside of his time in San Francisco, this is a much different kicker than that time in San Francisco. His confidence doesn't look to be as shot as it was there. Change of scenery spot for sure. Since playing for the Bears and the Commanders, Moody has hit 93.7% of his kicks. So there should be a trust factor there, even though he's got the reputation from San Francisco as not being a trustworthy kicker. Jake Moody, one of my streamers for week 14. We're going to get to our next one, and our next one is going to be Riley Patterson of the Miami Dolphins, going to be at the Jets, rostered in just 2% of leagues. Listen, the Dolphins here are on a 3-game winning streak. Patterson has had back-to-back games with at least double-digit points, so that's kinda helping him out, this winning streak. Apparently, whatever they're doing on offense, it's putting Patterson in a position to kick field goals. Before the Monday Night Football matchup between the Patriots and the Giants, Patterson has a 3rd most points of this week, and honestly, it's not even the winning streak, actually. Taking a look a little bit further, in his last 6 games, Patterson is averaging 3 more points per game than he averaged in the previous 6 games. So he's getting a lot more points on a per game basis. Now Patterson's going up against a Jets team that is tied for the 2nd most fantasy points allowed to the kicking position. And a little more on that. Also, they are also just one of 4 teams allowing over 10 points per game to the position. And in his earlier matchup against the Jets this season, Patterson scored 9 points. So the weather also looks promising. We like to keep checking that this time of year. So Riley Patterson is another player that I love. He is one of my streamers. Let's get to our last streamer, and this is going to be it's going to be the big man, Harrison Mevis of the Los Angeles Rams. Rostered in 3% of leagues, going to be at the Arizona Cardinals. And if we're taking a look at this, it's a nice matchup here. It hasn't been great for fantasy for Mevis. He's scored double-digit points only once out of his 4 games played. But again, I'm absolutely in love with this matchup. The Cardinals have allowed a league high 8 games with double-digit points, and even more recent, they allowed double-digit points in four straight games, and that was to the tune an average of 13 points per game. So we love to see that as well. Not to mention, even when the Cardinals aren't allowing 10 points to the position, they're consistently allowing a good amount of points. The Cardinals enter this week as one of the only teams, I believe just one of 2 teams actually, that doesn't have a single game of allowing less than 5 points to the kicking position. Listen, again, I said it. There hasn't been a lot of great weeks for Mevis in terms of fantasy, but if there is a week to do it, it is in this opponent against the Cardinals. You know what? I'm going to ride the momentum of the Rams are going to want to come out swinging after I don't want to call it embarrassing loss, but an unexpected loss against the Carolina Panthers. I think the Rams come out swinging. They want to solidify that NFC West, make sure that they end up taking that sucker home. So give me Harrison Mevis, again, my last streamer, rostered in less than 5% of leagues. With that said, we will now get into our tiered rankings, our top 12 tiered rankings. I'll just tell you guys after I just went through the streamers there, if you have any questions or comments, fire it into the chat. I take great pride in trying to answer as many of you as I possibly can. Let's get to tier 1, and it consists of just 2 players. Tier 1 is going to have number 1 kicker on the week is going to be Jason Myers of the Seattle Seahawks at the Atlanta Falcons. Listen, Jason Myers is our highest scoring kicker on the season, and he's everything that we expected Brandon Aubrey to be honest with you. He has a league high 7 games with at least 10 points scored, and if you wanted to find his last game with less than 8 points, you'd have to go all the way back to week 5 of this season. Since that week 5 game, Myers has averaged 12.3 points per game, and now he's going up against the Falcons here. The Falcons are outside the top 12 in terms of points allowed to kickers, but they have allowed 10 or more points in 2 out of their last 3 games. So we have a little bit of momentum there in terms of points allowed. It's also worth pointing out, of course, since this game is in Atlanta, it will be played indoors, so we don't need to concern ourselves with the weather. So Jason Myers, my number 1 kicker on the week. If we can go to number 2 is going to be Mr. Chase McLaughlin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you guys remember, I told you guys last week the better weeks were ahead for Chase. Had a couple tough matchups. Week 13 was the start of better days ahead for Chase McLaughlin. That proved to be the case, as he was one of 6 kickers with double-digit points in the week, and it was his first such game since week 8 with double-digit points. So finally, we get a little bit of relief on that, and now he's looking to make it back-to-back games with double-digit points against the New Orleans Saints. Last time McLaughlin went up against the Saints, that's when he was the apple of everybody's fantasy football eye, as he went on to score 17 fantasy points. Matter of fact, in his last 3 games against the Saints, he has averaged 12.3 points. So that's also promising as well. McLaughlin isn't the only kicker that's doing well against the Saints as well. In their last 2 games, the Saints have allowed a total of 29 fantasy points to kickers. In terms of weather, There is rain on the forecast on Saturday, but Sunday, as of now, looks good. Not much wind at all. But again, keep an eye on it. We know weather patterns can change, but it doesn't look like anything significant enough happening on Saturday that even if it bleeds into Sunday, that I'm going to worry and panic and drop McLaughlin in my rankings. Jason Myers and Chase McLaughlin, barring something unforeseen like an injury or an act of God, they're going to be my tier one. They're going to be my 1-2. They're not going anywhere. Speaking of that, let's get into tier two since those guys aren't going anywhere. And listen, I'll put timestamps in here, but Jake Moody, my number 3 ranked kicker on the week, is one of my streamers. So go back to the streamer portion, learn what I had to say about Jake Moody, or listen to what I had to say about Jake Moody. Why would you learn? You just listen to it. What the hell am I talking about? But he is my 3rd ranked kicker. We'll go to my 4th ranked kicker on the week, and you guys see the graphic there. It's Mr. Chris Boswell of the Pittsburgh Steelers going to be at the Baltimore Ravens. This will be Boswell's first time playing against the Ravens this season. Thanks to allowing 24 points to kickers last week, the Ravens now lead the league in fantasy points allowed to kickers with 130 points on the season. They also haven't had a single week in which they've allowed less than 5 points to the position. And listen, if there's an area of concern with Boswell, it would be the Steelers quarterback position. That's the only thing I can really think of here. We watched Aaron Rodgers look like he got beat up. I mean, people were using it as a meme saying he looked like he just tried to break into Kevin McAllister's house. Very funny post, but not very funny for Pittsburgh Steelers fans. But listen, while the quarterback situation does concern me a little bit, it should be reminded, by the way, that Boswell, he's not. Maybe he falls a spot or two, but let's not forget that in his last 8 games against the Ravens, Boswell's averaging 9.6 points. That was with quarterbacks like Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson. So he hasn't exactly had, vintage Ben Roethlisberger, and now all of a sudden he's just got a bad quarterback situation. So I think that we can see him endure the poor quarterback play and still put up a fine outing. So he is my number 4 ranked kicker in tier 2. Let's get to my number 5 ranked kicker. And yes, that is everybody's, what I feel like is everybody's personal favorite. It's Kyami Fairbairn of the Houston Texans, going to be at the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. Last week, Fairbairn broke his 3-game streak with over 10 points, but he still managed to score 8 points. It's not the worst thing in the world. Even with missing 2 games this year, Fairbairn's still top 5 in terms of kicker points on the year. Now he's going up against the Chiefs, as I mentioned. In the first 9 weeks of the season, the Chiefs had allowed the 3rd fewest points to kickers. That script has completely flipped because ever since then, they've now allowed the 3rd most points. But that's over the last 3 weeks, I should say, because they did have a bye in there. So over the last 3 weeks, they are now top 3 in points allowed. So 42% of the Chiefs' points that have been allowed to kickers have come in that 3-game span. So it's one of those things where you're playing blackjack and the dealer keeps busting and you want to just keep betting, keep diving in. We're doing that with Fairbairn against the Chiefs. So lock him up there as my 5th ranked kicker. Don't be surprised if he slides up a spot. But yeah, definitely love Fairbairn this week. The last kicker that's going to round out my tier 2 is going to be Mr. Brandon Aubrey of the Dallas Cowboys. While it was encouraging last week, Brandon Aubrey had his first game with double-digit points since week 7. I'm not entirely sure he's going to be able to duplicate that in week 14 here. In their road games this season, the Cowboys are attempting just 1.5 field goals per game. The Lions currently have 9 games in which they've allowed less than 10 points to the position. So all of this coupled with the Lions allowing the 6th fewest points to kickers, it has me sticking with Aubrey 6th at best. I mean, listen, on paper, the last few years, obviously Aubrey is a tier 1. He was a tier 1 for me for a long time, but right now we do have to stick with the facts of what's going on. I just happen to like other names more. If you have Brandon Aubrey, I'm sure he's still serviceable. This isn't a real drop him spot unless one of those kickers that I mentioned earlier is still available. Although I probably wouldn't drop him for Jake Moody, but whatever, be that as it may. So let's get into tier three again. I'll just tell you guys if you have any questions or comments at all, please feel into the chat. But let's get into tier three now. My seventh ranked kicker, Tyler Snoop a Loop. And yeah, listen, I had Snoop a Loop ranked as my number one kicker in back to back weeks. Did a good job the first week, at least. He had 11 points, but this past week on Thanksgiving night, he delivered a very measly, whimpery 2 points, just following suit with the rest of the Baltimore Ravens offense. The matchup honestly isn't terrible, but I'm worried about the Ravens offense. I'm more so worried about the Ravens offense than I was for Chris Boswell worrying about the Steelers quarterback situation. I mean, I got a feeling something's got to be going on with Lamar still hurting more than he's letting us know. But, and listen, maybe Loop can maybe leapfrog Aubrey in these rankings. But right now, based on what I'm seeing from this offense, it's kind of scaring the crap out of me. So I'm going to keep Tyler Loop right here at 7. What the Ravens offense does this week will kind of predicate it'll tell you what I'm going to do rest of season in terms of the fantasy football playoffs, how trustworthy Tyler Loop can be, but he's still a top 12 kicker. Let's not get it too crazy. We're not dropping or anything crazy like that. So number 7 is where he'll stay. Number 8, I mentioned Brandon Aubrey going up against the Detroit Lions. Well, Jake Bates is playing against the Dallas Cowboys. Thursday Night Football should be a great game. But yeah, Jake Bates is the 8th ranked kicker for me on the week. Listen, the concern for Jake Bates is always the same. It's Dan Campbell's aggressiveness on fourth down, resulting in fewer field goal attempts. Those concerns, honestly, make total sense when realizing that Bates only has one game this season with more than 2 field goal attempts. Only one. And then there's the Cowboys that has their improved defense, and they have allowed less than 5 points to kickers now in back-to-back games. It should make sense that the Cowboys have allowed an average of just 1.3 field goal attempts over the last 3 weeks. Bates might do more than 5 points this week, but I'm reluctant to really rank him any higher than 8. This is where he's going to go. I would tell you he's got the potential to fall a spot or two more than he does rise whatsoever. So it's almost rounding out tier 3. We'll get to my last guy. It's a 9th ranked kicker. It's Harrison Mevis, who I mentioned, the beautiful big boy here on this graphic. If you go to the timestamps, you can go ahead and take a look at what I had to say about Harrison Mevis being one of my 3 streaming kickers for week 14. Let's wrap this puppy up, though. Let's get to tier 4. Cameron Dicker, the kicker, is kind of in uncharted territory here back in tier 4. Not really a spot where I usually have him. Normally, Dicker is a lock for tier 1 or 2, but this week we have him a little bit lower. In order for me to move him up any higher, I'm going to need to see what's going on with Justin Herbert in the hand. You guys all know he did have a fracture in his hand, was getting surgery on it. Whether he plays or not is still up in the air. This is also against the Eagles, by the way. This is on Monday Night Football. It is home, though, in Los Angeles. But, the Eagles, who haven't allowed 10 points to a kicker since week 7, and in their last 4 games, the defending champions are allowing an average of just 5 points per game to kickers, so that's not great either. Weeks 15 and 16 will be better for Dicker in terms of matchup. We'll see how things go with Justin Herbert and his hand. But for right now, he's a little bit lower in my ranks this week. Same thing I was kind of saying about Chase McLaughlin. Just ride out the storm. He's still going to put up points. He's still going to be a top 12 play. I would really warn you against if you wanted to drop Cameron Dicker for somebody else that I think is going to have a better week this week. That could be dicey. Somebody could swoop him up and take him for the fantasy football playoffs, which is not what you want. My number 11 ranked kicker is going to be Riley Patterson of the Miami Dolphins. Again, he is one of my streamers, so if you go to the timestamps, you can go ahead and check out what I had to say about Mr. Riley Patterson. Do love him in his matchup going up against the New York Jets. Let's get to our last player in tier 4, and it's going to be Will Lutz of the Denver Broncos. He was one of my streamers last week, as I mentioned, did score 9 points. Lutz still has a low roster percentage of just 18% on Sleeper right now, but I expect him to deliver another top 12 week, back end of top 12. The Broncos kicker only had 1 week with double-digit points scored, but at least 7 games with at least 8 points. So So he's still, while he's not getting 10 points every single week, he's still giving you a consistent outing, a good outing. And all of that said, I feel like the Broncos have been moving the ball better the last few weeks. If you take a look at this, while Denver had attempted just 1.8 field goals this season over the past 3 weeks, that has jumped from 1.8 to 3 field goal attempts per game over the last 3 weeks. The Rams defense isn't the Raiders defense. I apologize. Still thinking about Harrison Mevis. The Raiders defense is not all that different. Whom the Denver Broncos will be going up against. This game will be in Las Vegas. While they only have 3 weeks of allowing 10 points or more, the Raiders also have 8 weeks of at least 8 points allowed. So again, same thing as Lutz. It's a nice little cocktail here. Not getting a lot of 10-point games, but you are getting points where they're games where they're allowing at least 8 points to the position. So Lutz will do better than his previous 4-point performance against the Raiders earlier this year, but he's still going to be sitting back here in tier 4 of my kicker rankings. People always like to ask, so just honorable mentions, just outside my top 12. It's Harrison Butker of the Kansas City Chiefs, and it's Evan McPherson just outside my top 12. I think both do well, but again, just happen to like some other names a little bit more. But guys, that's going to do it for this show. Again, if you have any questions or comments, fire them into the comment section below. I will happily answer them. Please like this video, helps me out immensely. And yes, the kicker video for the playoffs is coming tomorrow, that being Tuesday. But until next time, folks, stay kind to one another. Well, stay thirsty, be kind to one another. We'll catch you on the flip side, and cheers.